So I left drama school. I went to university. Did 1 year at drama school, and I left in '97. And my drama school had a few Americans on this course that they did. They had a few international students, and they arranged for an audition, not audition, a showcase, like they do in London. At the end of your course, they put you in a West End theatre, and you do scene studies essentially, and then you invite agents and all the rest of it. So we'd done that in London, and I had a bit of interest with an agent, and we did the same thing in New York. We went over. I had a bit of interest there, but not a great deal. But because I had American passport, I said very, very quickly and early to my agents, prospective agents. I didn't sign when they won, but they were sort of just representing me just to see what would happen. I just said, look, I have this passport. I would like to explore things on the other side of the Atlantic as well. I'm not ready to go and move there, but I would like that to be an option. And I'm looking back, it's a slightly odd thing for me to say because my training had been entirely in the theater. There was zero camera work. I'd never worked on camera at all. But I guess this showcase was more for Broadway. It was more theatrical stuff that I did. Anyway, my agent that I did sign with then introduced me to an LA agent, a guy called J. Michael Bloom, who had an agency on Sunset. Yeah, I met him in the Dorchester Hotel. He would hold court, like he would dress like with extremely fancy clothes. And he would, at the Dorchester, he would have high tea and then a procession of sort of eligible young, vaguely aesthetically pleasing young men, mainly, would parade, and he would have tea with them and sort of say yes or no. And I was one of those. And so he invited me over to LA to do a pilot season. I had been to the West Coast. I'd been to San Francisco a couple of times, but I'd never been to LA. I'd never wanted to go to LA, to be honest. It didn't seem like a real place to me. I only knew it from the movies, like from Beverly Hills Cop and things like that, and E.T. and others. But anyway, it just seemed like odd things happened there. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was running around there. Yeah. And I had no real interest in going, to be honest. And when I went, he lent me a beat up old Toyota and his Thomas guide. And I had no money. And I had done a bit of work. You're right. I'd done a thing called Horatio Hornblower, and I'd done a thing called lots of costume dramas, like lots of sort of BBC and international costume dramas. And the Hornblower had won an international Emmy, and there was some interest, and A&E were the part producers. So there was a bit of traction there. But I went over and I did these auditions, and I pretended to be an American kid, and it was just so weird, and I was so alone, and I found it just supremely odd. I stayed in 2 nights. I booked into a hotel, that Beverly Laurel Motor Hotel on Beverly Boulevard, where Swingers Diner used to be. Yes. There used to be a diner called Swingers. There was a motel behind it. So 2 nights there. I think that cost me like $125 a night, which was like extravagant. Yeah. But then I got out the yellow pages and just rang up motels and said, look, if I stay for a month, will you give me a rate? And luckily for me, the Hollywood Best Inn responded. And it's called the Hollywood Best Inn, right? How bad could the Hollywood Best Inn be? It's on Cahuenga. And it's by a gas station, and they did me $20 a night for a month. So I couldn't believe my luck.
Wow.
Yes. And anyway, Hollywood Best Inn and I got to know each other pretty well. It was run by a nice Indian family, East Indian family. And I stayed there for a month, and I drove this old Toyota around, and I did loads of these castings. And so that happened in probably 99.
Okay.
And I ended up getting a job, ironically, in the theater to do a British play in La Jolla. So that was not on my radar, and I turned that one down. And I went back home, and I kept working just about in the UK, just doing bits of TV and bits of mainly TV. And then so LA was a thing. And eventually, I met my manager, a guy called Alan Seal. This is a very long story, but essentially, I had a manager.
Super interesting, though.
I had a manager, and I would go out to LA every pilot season and do a few weeks. And after the end of every pilot season, I said to myself, never again. I'm not putting myself through that until I have some sort of pull and I have a credit that people really are interested in me for. I'm not doing the cattle calls with every kid from Iowa who just pulled up in a pickup. I felt like my thing was slightly different. I wasn't going to sell it in the same way. I can't pretend to be, the next Brad Pitt. I am European. I'm a bit of both.
You could have pretended to be the next. Brad Pitt.
I tried really hard, but it didn't work clearly because it never really happened. But anyway, so and then 1 year I did get a part in a movie opposite Julia Stiles and Kathy Bates, a film called Carolina, and I was super excited. It was to play a Brit, like it was to play Julia Stiles' on off, a sort of twerpy Brit, posh Brit, and Alessandra Nivola was in it. We did a table read, and I just thought, this is it. I've made it. I finally made it. I'm in Hollywood. I'm doing a movie with all these great people. And then we were due to film on the Monday. We'd done the table read, done the wardrobe, done everything, done some rehearsals. And I was at a Laker game with my housemate, who, well, I say housemate. I was surfing his couch for months. Bless him, Denny Rubianis and my friend Will Taylor, who big shout out to them because they put me up for 4 months in Hollywood. And then anyway, the financing for this film went south. So I ended up hanging out forever. I eventually ran out of money, and I think Denny and Will probably had enough of me. And I jumped on a plane saying to John, I'll turn straight back and come back out as soon as you've got your ducks in a row. But I just need to go back to London. I got back to London. And then I got offered this terrible little film, which was in Scotland. And long story short, that had another shitty hotel, but I was staying in a room, and in the room next door was my leading lady, which turned into my wife. And I never did go back to shoot Carolina. But the following year, or maybe it was the year after that, I'd go back every year essentially. And I got this manager, Alan Siegel, dear friend, who's no longer, we're not working together anymore, but still a great friend. And it was through him. I was leaving a show in Britain called Ultimate Force, and I was going over to LA for 2 weeks. Kerry was pregnant. We just found out. So life was pretty scary. There was nothing immediately on the horizon. You know, I'd worked, and then I'd do time when I wasn't working, and I would work, and I, lived pretty simply. But I had 2 weeks. I went to LA. I booked it in. It was before Christmas in the year. It was 2002. And Alan has an apartment under his house in West Hollywood, and I literally got off the plane, got to his house, got settled downstairs, and he texted me saying, come upstairs for a cocktail. So I went upstairs, he poured me a lovely martini, and then he threw this script on the table, and it said Battlestar Galactica by Ronald D. Moore, a mini-series. Night 1, open, read, mission statement, blah, 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 you know the rest.
Yeah.
And, I sort of went, oh, wow, I remember this from when I was a kid. Wow. Okay, they're doing this again. Well, I guess that's what Hollywood does. Anyway, I met you about 4 days later after a couple of auditions. And, by the end of the 2 weeks, literally on the last night, Kerry had flown out, and we were out partying in Casa Vega having margaritas because I'd been offered this role.